Rolls Royce has committed to manufacturing Gripen engines in Canada. And there's one particular detail that's shaking up Canada's aviation industry.
Swedish defense firm Saab wants Canada to buy and build its fighter jet.
Picture this, a Swedish fighter jet, already considered one of the most advanced in the world, just got a new heart, not from Sweden, not from America, not even from a traditional aerospace giant, from the same company that builds engines for Rolls Royce cars. And when NATO found out what this engine could actually do, they went very, very quiet. This is the story of how one engineering decision in a British workshop just reshuffled the entire balance of European air power, and why nobody is talking about it loudly enough. Today, we're diving deep into the Saab Gripen, one of the most underrated fighter jets on the planet, and the jaw-dropping decision to replace its engine with a Rolls Royce power plant. Now, before you click off thinking this is just a tech update, stay with me, because this story involves secret negotiations, a jet that punches way above its weight class, and a move that has defense analysts in Brussels and Washington asking the same uncomfortable question: did we underestimate the Gripen this entire time? Let's go. To understand why this engine swap is such a big deal, you first need to understand what the Gripen actually is, and why the world keeps sleeping on it. On paper, the Saab Gripen looks modest. It's small, it's relatively cheap. It doesn't have the raw size or the Hollywood reputation of an F-35 or a Eurofighter Typhoon. But here's what the brochure doesn't tell you. In NATO air exercise after NATO air exercise, red flag, tactical fighter weapon instructor. Course, joint drills across Europe. The Gripen consistently pulls off something that embarrasses far more expensive jets. It wins. Not sometimes, consistently. Swedish and other Gripen pilots have racked up simulated kill ratios that have left F-15 and F-16 pilots scratching their heads. In one famous red flag exercise, Gripen pilots achieved an 8-to-1 kill ratio against USAF aggressor aircraft, 8-to-1. So how does a lightweight, budget-friendly Scandinavian jet do that? The answer comes down to three things: agility, electronics, and, crucially, operational philosophy. The Gripen was designed from day one with a different question in mind. Most fighters are designed around the question, how do we build the most powerful jet possible? The Swedes asked something different. They asked, how do we build a jet that actually survives and wins a war fought on Swedish soil under Swedish conditions? That meant a jet that could take off from roads. Yes, actual public roads. A jet that could be refueled and rearmed in 10 minutes by a crew of conscripts with basic training. A jet that could operate from dispersed, hidden locations rather than big, vulnerable airbases that would be the first things destroyed in a real conflict. The Gripen wasn't built for air shows. It was built for war. And then, just when this already impressive platform was hitting its ceiling, Rolls-Royce walked into the room. But here's what nobody expected. The engine Rolls-Royce brought to the table wasn't just an upgrade. It was a generational leap, and the implications go far beyond speed and thrust. Because what this engine changes about the Gripen isn't just how it flies, it's where it can fly, and who might want one. Stay with me, because this is where it gets really interesting. The original Gripen, the A, B, C, and D variants, flew on the Volvo Aero RM12, a modified version of the General Electric F404 engine. It was a solid, reliable power plant, proven, dependable. But it was, by modern standards, a product of the 1980s. The Gripen E, Saab's latest and most ambitious variant, needed something fundamentally better: more thrust, better fuel efficiency, lower infrared signature, and critically, the ability to power an entirely new generation of avionics and systems that demand more electrical power than ever before. Enter Rolls-Royce and the EJ200. Now, the EJ200 isn't entirely new. It was originally developed for the Eurofighter Typhoon. But what Rolls-Royce has done for the Gripen E integration isn't just a transplant, it's a reimagining. The EJ200 produces around 20,000 pounds of thrust in afterburner, a staggering increase over the old RM12. But raw thrust numbers only tell part of the story. The real revolution is in efficiency. The EJ200 burns significantly less fuel to produce that power, which means the Gripen E has dramatically extended range without increasing its fuel tank size. For a jet already famous for being cheap to operate, this is a force multiplier. Then there's the electrical generation. Modern air combat is fought on data, electronic warfare, sensor fusion, jamming, real-time battlefield awareness. All of this eats power. The new Rolls Royce integration gives the Gripen E the electrical backbone to run systems that fighters twice its size struggle to sustain. And here's the detail that really caught NATO analysts off guard. The EJ-200's infrared signature, the heat it produces that enemy missiles can track, is substantially lower than the older engine. Combined with the Gripen's already small radar cross-section, you now have a jet that is genuinely difficult to detect, track, and engage. A small, fast, agile, radar-elusive jet with next-generation electronics capable of operating from a forest clearing, crewed by well-trained pilots who have already proven they can beat F-15s in a fair fight. You start to see why certain rooms in Brussels got very quiet. But here's the question nobody in the mainstream defense press is asking loudly enough. If the Gripen E with this engine is this capable, why aren't more NATO nations ordering it? The answer involves politics, money, industrial deals, and one very uncomfortable truth about how NATO procurement actually works. And once you hear it, you'll never look at fighter jet purchase announcements the same way again. Here's the thing about NATO procurement. It's not purely about what's the best jet. If it were, the story would be simple. It's about industrial partnerships. It's about which country's defense industry gets to grow. It's about political alignment, technology transfer agreements, and decades-old relationships between governments and defense contractors. The United States has an enormous vested interest in European nations buying American jets, particularly the F-35. Not just because of the revenue, but because the F-35 program creates deep interoperability and dependency. Nations that fly F-35s share data systems, maintenance infrastructure, and supply chains with the United States. That's a form of strategic alignment that goes far beyond the aircraft itself. The Gripen, for all its tactical brilliance, doesn't come with that web of dependencies. Sweden sells you a jet, and then you own it. You can maintain it. You can modify it. You can operate it without asking Washington for permission. For some NATO nations, that's a problem. For others, it's exactly the point. Poland, for example, looked closely at the Gripen before ultimately choosing the F-35. The Czech Republic flew Gripens for years before transitioning to, you guessed it, F-35s. The pattern is consistent. But now, with the Gripen E and the Rolls Royce engine entering the picture, something is shifting. Brazil already operates the Gripen E, and their pilots are reporting performance characteristics that have defense attachés from multiple countries requesting detailed briefings. The Swedish Air Force's own operational experience with the upgraded platform is being watched extremely carefully. And there's a new variable that nobody predicted 18 months ago. The war in Ukraine changed the calculus on everything. Suddenly, range matters more. Dispersed basing matters more. Operating without large fixed infrastructure matters enormously, because everyone just watched what happens to large fixed infrastructure when someone with precision missiles decides to take it out. The Gripen was built for exactly this threat environment, and now the whole of Europe is staring down exactly this threat. Add a Rolls Royce engine that extends its range and survivability, and the Gripen E starts looking less like a budget option and more like a visionary design. Some NATO analysts, privately, are starting to admit they got the value assessment wrong. So here's the bigger question this whole story raises. We spend billions, sometimes hundreds of billions, on defense procurement. We have armies of analysts, generals, politicians, and lobbyists all weighing in on what the right jet is. And yet, a relatively small Swedish company working with a British engine maker quietly built something that keeps outperforming the consensus choice. What does that tell us about how we make these decisions? And more importantly, what comes next? Because Rolls-Royce isn't done, and neither is Saab. The Rolls-Royce and Saab partnership isn't a one-time event. It's a signal of a deeper strategic direction. Saab has been quietly developing what insiders are calling Gripen evolution, a roadmap of upgrades that takes the E variant's already formidable foundation and continues pushing it forward. The EJ200 integration is the cornerstone of that roadmap because it provides the power, range, and reliability that everything else depends on. There are reports, not yet officially confirmed, of work being done on adaptive engine technology that would give the Gripen even greater efficiency across different flight regimes. If that comes to fruition, you're looking at a jet with F-35 level range, Typhoon level speed, and operating costs that are a fraction of either. On the weapons side, the Gripen E is already cleared for Meteor, the beyond visual range missile widely considered the most capable air-to-air weapon in the Western inventory. In simulated combat, Meteor's no-escape zone, the area from which a target simply cannot evade the missile, is 2 to 3 times larger than the AIM-120 AMRAAM carried by most American jets. Pair Meteor with a jet that's hard to detect, costs less to operate, can fly from a highway, and now has a world-class engine, and you have something genuinely frightening for any adversary. NATO knows this, which is probably why the official response to the Rolls Royce engine announcement was notably measured. No press conferences, no celebration from Brussels, just quiet acknowledgement. Because celebrating the Gripen too loudly creates an uncomfortable question for every nation that just signed a multi-billion-dollar F-35 contract. Did we need to spend all that money? Here's what I want to leave you with. The Gripen story isn't just about a jet engine. It's about what happens when you refuse to accept that bigger and more expensive automatically means better. The Swedes looked at the problem differently. They built something elegant, practical, and brutally effective. And now, with Rolls Royce handing them the final piece of the puzzle, they've created something that the most powerful military alliance in history is quietly, reluctantly reassessing. That's not just an aerospace story. That's a story about how innovation actually works, about who gets listened to and who gets ignored, and about what happens when the underdog is right all along. The Gripen was always this good. It just took the right engine and a war on Europe's doorstep for the rest of the world to finally notice. If you found this video valuable, hit subscribe, because we cover exactly these kinds of stories, the ones happening underneath the headlines, the ones that actually matter. Drop a comment below. I want to know, do you think NATO nations should be taking the Gripen E more seriously? I'll see you in the next one.